Welcome to A.U.M. Ask Us Marketing. I'm your host, Kalli Fedusenko of Kalli Collective. Kalli Collective is a digital marketing agency focused on building relationships between financial advisors and their target audience, using data to create websites, online content, and ads. We build relationships first and we grow numbers second. If that's an approach that resonates with you, then sign up to get our emails at the QR code above my head to get some helpful tips you can apply to your marketing, and or visit our site by scanning the QR code below my head. Today's episode is brought to you by the Financial Planning Association, otherwise known as the FPA. FPA is a great resource center providing education, support, and networking opportunities for financial advisors like you. Networking doesn't have to feel awkward or forced. Melissa from Powerful Women Powerful Women Rising is joining us today to talk about how to build genuine connections, make a lasting impression, and turn networking into enjoyable and productive experience, which goes perfectly with our other conversation with Kyle Kuhn, who was talking about making conversations count. So if you've ever dreaded networking events or struggled to break the ice, then this session is for you. So let's make networking natural, fun, and impactful. Join with me, Melissa. Hi,
Good
Melissa.
morning. Hi.
How are you doing today?
Good. I actually love Powerful Women Uprising. We might have to change.
a little aggressive for Monday morning.
Maybe on Mondays we're Powerful Women Rising, but by Friday we are Powerful Women Uprising.
Ooh, yes, I like that. I like
There we
that. Melissa, you are the network queen. And so I want to know the human side of networking, right? Why do so many people approach networking the wrong way? And what is the wrong way and how can they shift?
Yeah, it's funny because when people say that, like, oh, you're the networking queen, or I call myself a networking expert, I think people expect me to be a certain way, or they assume that I'm like out there every day and every night at the happy hours and schmoozing and meeting the people. And I love talking about networking and being the one to talk about it because that is not me at all. So part of the problem is people think that they don't like networking because they think networking is all about schmoozing, and it's really not. The wrong approach to networking, I would say, is looking at it like a transaction, going into it thinking, what can I get out of this, instead of thinking about who can I connect with. One of the things that I talk about a lot is remembering the reason and the purpose of networking. So a lot of people think, and I thought when I first started networking too, that the purpose of networking was to find clients, right? Like we walk into a room and we're like, who can buy, like, which of these people looks like they want to maybe buy my stuff? Or like, which of these people looks like they might know somebody who wants to buy my stuff?
Right.
But really, the purpose of networking is to build your network. And when you keep that approach in mind, it helps you do it from a more human place. It helps you to be more real, to show up authentically, to build trust with people and learn about other people, rather than just focusing on selling or pitching. And it seems kind of counterintuitive because you're like, if I'm not talking about my business, if I'm not selling, right? People are always saying you have to make offers. You have to make offers. How do people know they can buy from you if you're not selling? Because when you're networking in this way and you're prioritizing connection over conversion, the sales happen naturally and organically because people, we all know, want to do business with people that they know, like, and trust. And so by making that shift in your thinking about what the purpose of networking is and approaching it as a conversation and from curiosity and wanting to know about people and looking for ways to provide value to other people rather than just trying to sell to them, you can do it in a way that actually feels good and is enjoyable and also gets compounding results.
I'm going to repeat what you said because I love it and I might steal it. Connection over conversion. I love that. That's such a great pitch Like, let's
Yeah.
connect, not convert.
Yeah.
Do you recommend, like, okay, let's say you are going to some sort of networking event. Do you recommend like going in with a strategy of who you're going to connect with while you're there? Or is it more organic in, hey, I really hit it off with this person?
Yeah. I think partially the answer to that question depends on where you are in your
Mm.
business, where you
Mhm.
are in your networking journey. If you're just getting started, maybe there's not anybody specific that you're looking for,
Right.
right? But if you've been networking for a while, if you have a pretty big network, maybe there are some gaps that you've identified that's like, I really need to
Mm.
meet somebody who can connect me with this opportunity, or I really need to meet somebody who does this thing. And
Mhm.
then you maybe can be more intentional about it.
Yeah.
But I always say, instead of necessarily going in thinking about like who are the people that you want to meet, always go in knowing what your goal is, like what your
Mm.
objective is. And that may be different
Mhm.
today than it is tomorrow.
Yeah.
For some people, it's just like, my only goal is to walk in the door, right? Like that. And some days, and depending on who you are, that is a valid objective, right?
Right.
Like that's
Yeah.
going to take a lot.
Yeah.
Other times it's my goal is maybe to talk to two people that I've never met before, because I'm just in this space of like practicing, starting having conversations and carrying on conversations and being interested and figuring out what questions to ask. Or maybe you are a little bit further in your journey. And so your goal is to find people who can connect you with speaking engagements,
Mm.
or find people who are really active on a certain social media platform that you're really
Right.
active on. So knowing what your goal is going to help you be a little bit more intentional about who you're connecting with and how you're making those decisions.
Got it. Great. I love that approach to networking. Um, as far as like, okay, let's talk about the people that it's harder just to show up, you know? Sometimes whatever's going on in your life, maybe your personality, maybe a combination of the two. What are some go-to strategies for starting conversations for that type of person in a way that feels authentic and engaging?
hmm Well, the first two things I would say before I answer that
Yeah.
question is, if you're really nervous and uncomfortable with networking, start out by going to some virtual events. I
Mm,
feel like going into a virtual room full of people that you don't know
yeah.
is way easier than going into an actual room full of people that
Yeah.
you don't know.
Yeah.
So that
Okay.
can be a good way to kind of get some practice,
Yeah.
and kind of ease yourself into it. And I
Mm.
always joke, like, if you end up in an awkward, uncomfortable situation, then you can just be like, oh, my internet connection's bad. Sorry, bye. That's like
That's
really hard
great.
to do when you're in person, right? So, I would say that, and then I also always recommend, like, bringing a friend with you, especially if you have a
Mm.
friend who is more outgoing or
Mhm.
extroverted than you, because that can be really helpful too. So,
Mhm.
as far as breaking the ice, I always encourage people to get away from the elevator pitch or the
Mm.
30-second commercial or whatever we're calling it. Um, and when you're having conversations with people, try to steer them away from that too. So
Okay.
a lot of times we'll ask, like, oh, so what do you do? Or tell me about your business, right? You're
Right.
basically just inviting them to give you
Yeah.
their pitch,
Mm.
or to recite their commercial
Mhm.
that is the
Mhm.
same thing they've recited to the last 20 people they talked to.
Mhm.
So I always like to start with a question that is a little bit more curiosity based and
Mm.
helps me learn a little bit more about their why, or the
Okay.
person underneath the business.
Yeah.
So sometimes I'll ask things like, why did you decide to come to this event?
Mm.
Or I will ask, tell me why you got into your business, or why
Okay.
you're still in your business, because sometimes those aren't the same thing.
That's true.
What's really exciting you about your business lately?
Yeah.
Questions like that, that allow them to still tell me about their business, but I also get to see the mission and vision and
Mm.
values and person behind the business.
Mm. Mhm.
So I really like those as talking points. I'm somebody who really does not enjoy small talk. I'm not good at it, and I think it's
Yeah.
very boring.
Yeah. Yep. My
But I've
husband feels
also
the
had
same.
to figure out the middle ground between, like, so how about this weather? And like, so tell me about your childhood traumas, right? Like, I don't even know your name, but love to hear it. And so
Gotta find that middle ground.
questions like that kind of help, it's not
Right.
super invasive, but it also helps you get to know the person.
Right.
But I think the biggest thing is just being yourself and
Yeah.
being authentic and being genuinely interested in the other person. I think the
Mm.
more you show up authentically, it gives other people permission to do the
Yeah.
same thing.
Mm.
Um, when people feel like there is small talk or the conversation is like fake and forced, they can feel
Mhm.
that too.
Mhm.
And they appreciate having a conversation with someone who is warm and
Yeah.
genuinely interested in them. And there's actually been studies that have shown the reaction in people's brains
Mhm.
when they are feeling loved is
Mm.
very similar to the reaction that their brains have when they feel seen or they feel heard.
Hmm.
So being curious about the person that you're talking to, asking like real follow-up questions to get
Right.
to know them is a great way to build that bond and create that connection really quickly.
Yeah. Speaking of follow-up, because you said follow-up questions, like, how can you stay in contact? How can you follow up with people that you have met, and have this connection with? How can you
Yeah.
maintain it?
That's one of the biggest questions that I get asked, and that's one of people's biggest issues, I think, when it comes to
Mhm.
networking is like, how do I keep track of all of these people? Because
Yeah.
we know it doesn't just happen at that event or in
Right.
that group, right? We have to do more than just show up to
Mhm.
cultivate and nurture those relationships. So, I actually created a networking planner that's on my website that
Mm.
one of the things that's on it is a space where you can keep track of the people that you met at networking events,
Mm.
where you met them, what you talked about, and why you want to follow up with them. So that's really helpful just to make sure that people don't get lost.
Yeah.
Um, but I also think it's important for people to know and to have permission to not follow up with every single person that you
Sure.
met.
Yeah.
Sometimes that's when we get bogged down is we think like, I need to follow up with everyone on this roster or I'm going to miss an opportunity, or I need to
Mhm.
follow up with every single person that I met at that event. And you actually don't.
Mm.
So being clear and discerning about who it is that you want to follow up with and
Mhm.
why you want to follow up with. And maybe it's just somebody that you really liked their energy, or you had a
Yeah.
really great conversation about your kids and their kids and you had a lot in common, or something like that. It doesn't have to be like, oh, I think they can get me somewhere in business.
Mm.
But be clear about who you want to follow up with and why you want to follow up with them.
Mm.
And then remember, again, just like going to the event, that following up isn't
Mhm.
just about checking the box. It's
Mm.
about continuing to have a conversation with them and connecting with them in a personalized human way. So don't just send your generic copy and paste, hey, it was great to
No.
meet you at that event. I would love to keep in touch. That's not going to get a response because it's not a connection, right? They may
Right.
not even remember who you are.
Yeah.
So I always write down notes if someone gives me their business card or if I have a roster or something like that. I'll write down notes about what we talked about. Like,
Yes.
oh, I connected with her and she has a son that is getting married this summer, right? So
Mhm.
then I know a month from now, when I reach out, I'll send her an email and just say, hey, it was great meeting you last month at such and such event.
Mhm.
I know your son's wedding is coming up. I hope you
Yeah.
have so much fun. Would love to get together for coffee when all that has calmed down or whatever,
Mhm.
like adding something like that tells the person that you're talking to that you cared about them, you were listening to what they
Mhm.
say, that it mattered enough that you remembered,
Right.
and that you cared enough to follow up. And
Yeah.
that is the kind of person that people want to connect with. That's the kind of person that people want to build a relationship with.
Right.
So, um, I would say personalizing your follow-up rather than sending something generic, and then also finding ways to continue to provide value to people.
Mm.
So whether that is like sometimes I'll just send a quick voice note like, "Hey, it was great to meet you at such and such thing. I was just thinking about our conversation about social media and how you were feeling so overwhelmed by all the platforms.
Mm.
And I just had this question, like, have you ever asked yourself, like, blah, 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 and just something for you to think about that I
Right.
was
Yeah.
thinking, you know,
Mm.
or I'll hear a podcast episode that is relevant, or I think they might benefit from,
Right.
or a LinkedIn article and forward it to them. It takes only a few seconds, but to that person on the
Mhm.
other end of it, that you cared enough to share that resource with them, to like think of them and share that resource with them,
Right.
is huge. So
Yeah.
always be looking for ways to provide value to people and give to them without expecting something in return.
Right. Um, you mentioned following up with someone a month later. Do you have like a recommended time frame of when you should follow up? I mean, I think conferences, I always feel like I have to wait a while because when you get back, you're like, "Oh, I'm so overwhelmed from all the work that I missed." Um,
Mhm.
are there like different types of networking events and different time frames of reaching out?
I think it kind of depends. I mean, it depends on where you are in your life, how much time capacity you have.
Fair.
A lot of times I will put on my schedule a half hour later than when the event ends, and in that half hour, I will come home and I will schedule emails to go out.
Mm,
So, it's done right then when I'm thinking about
right.
it and the person is still fresh in my mind,
Yeah.
but it doesn't go out until another 2, 3 weeks later. I wouldn't do more than maybe a month or 2 out, or they are going
Mhm.
to probably forgotten,
Mhm.
or seem kind of, like, random and weird, like, really 2 months later? Um, but you also don't, you don't wanna feel like you have to be following up with all of these people every other week or every 2 weeks, or, something like that.
Right.
So, I think it kinda just depends. I think any time in that first month is probably good,
Yeah.
depending on where your life is at, what you're looking for, what kind of a connection you're trying to create. And
Mm.
sometimes it's just, commenting on their LinkedIn post, or, like, keeping
Yeah.
the conversation and the connection going that way. So it doesn't have to be big and overcomplicated. Like, people
Right.
even follow up and they think like, "Oh, I have to have a coffee date with them." You
Right.
don't.
Yeah.
There are a lot of ways that you can follow up and keep in touch and continue that connection
Mhm.
without having to have 100 coffee dates.
All right, let's talk about this salesy weirdo. Like, what kind of behaviors is that person doing? And, so we know what to avoid.
Yeah. So one of my taglines is networking like a human and not like a salesy weirdo. And
Mhm.
it's funny because anytime I say that to somebody, they always have an idea in their head, like, oh, I know exactly what that means. So,
Mm.
like, do you have an idea? Like, when I say that, is there something that comes to mind that you're like, oh,
Yes.
this is total salesy weirdo? What is it?
Yeah. Uh, it's the person who's always pitching.
Hmm.
I feel like I can't, even if they were to send me something, after I've connected with them, because they've made this impression, I'm gonna be like, they're just trying to sell me something. They don't
Yeah.
really care.
Yeah. Yeah, and they're usually pitching to you before they even really know much.
Right.
Like, I have known some salesy weirdos that I felt like I couldn't even, like, I was afraid to say anything around them or, like, post anything on social media, because it would be like, "Oh, how sad, I broke my ankle today." And all of a sudden I've got like 10 salesy weirdos in my DMs that are like, "I have this cream, I have this laser, I have this
Right.
essential oil, I have this," like,
Yeah.
okay. Um I had a woman come up to me once after a networking event. Then I had mentioned something in passing about, like, having a headache or PMS or
Mm,
something,
mhm.
and she, like, beelined for me right after to try to,
Yeah.
like, sell me her thing that would fix my headache, and I'm like, I didn't ask for anyone to fix my headache. I was just
Right.
sharing that I had it.
Yeah.
So, leading with your offer, starting your pitch 2 minutes into the conversation, pitching someone
Mhm.
who hasn't been asked to be pitched, saying that you wanna connect with someone. A connection and a consult or a sales
Mhm.
call are not the same thing. So even
Mm.
if you get on a call with somebody that's like, "Hey, I'd really just love to connect with you. I'd love to get to
Mhm.
know you better. Let's have a conversation." If it does lead to a potential sale on either of your ends, that's
Mm.
great. But that's when we say, let's schedule a different call to talk about that. You want to make sure
Okay.
that people feel safe having these connection calls with you, and
Right.
like it's never going to devolve into a sales call. So I
Yeah.
would love to talk to you about that. Why don't we schedule another call next week to talk about like the sales? Um,
Interesting. Okay.
so that helps people feel safe and
Yeah.
helps you to not make it awkward and gross.
Right.
Because sometimes it turns into a sales call just because they don't know how to tell you they're not interested. So giving them that option is really a good thing.
Right.
Um, Other salesy weirdo behavior, the people who start passing out their business cards before they even know what your name is or if you
Mm.
even have any interest in their business card. The people who you don't even know who they are, but they send you a DM on your birthday saying, "Hey, happy birthday. I'd love to send you a free sample of my protein
Mhm.
shake."
Mhm.
The people who dominate the conversations, who
Mhm.
like they say, "Oh, I'd really love to connect with you." And so you schedule a 30-minute Zoom with them and they talk for 28. And
Mhm.
then they're like, this happens to me more times than I wish it did. Then the last 2 minutes, they're like, "Oh, well, let's schedule another call because I'd really love to learn about you." And you're like,
Yes,
"I
I've
am
been
not
on one of those
doing this
calls.
again." The, like walking brochure,
Right,
uh,
right.
the people who are like overly fake friendly,
Mm.
um, the people who are kind of like shady or sketchy about what they
Mm.
do,
Mm.
like
Mhm.
when I'm helping at networking events, a lot of times I will say like clear is always better than clever. We
Yes.
introduce ourselves in a really clever way. And I see people who are in direct sales or
Mhm.
multi-level marketing do this a lot because
Mhm.
they don't want people to know that they're in direct sales or multi-level marketing. So
Mm.
they will
Okay.
say, I'm a representative for a health and wellness company, or they
Mm.
will say, I'm a health coach, or they'll
Mhm.
say, I help women in menopause manage their symptoms, right? And all of that
Mm.
is great, but
Mhm.
also like if you're helping women in menopause, you could be a lot of things, right? You could be a
Right.
health coach, you could be a mindset coach, you could be a doctor, you could be a hormone person, you could be an
Yeah.
essential oils person. Like we
Right.
don't know what you are, what you do, right?
Right.
So being clear about that, and I understand. I see this starting to happen a lot too in the coaching
Mhm.
industry. People don't want to say that they're coaches because there's a
Mm.
lot of people that are like about
Yeah.
coaches right now. But
Right.
the reality is, if somebody doesn't want to talk to you because they know that you're in direct sales, you doing it in this weird roundabout sketchy way, and then later they find out and you're in direct sales is not going to do you any
Not
favors, right?
helpful.
Like they're either your person or they're not your
Yeah.
person. So
Yeah.
be honest about what you do and what you're about and what your intentions are. If you want to
Mhm.
connect with someone because you see a potential for a collaboration, if you want to connect with someone because she said she has a podcast and you want to be a guest on it, or if you just want to connect with someone because she seems like a cool person,
Mm.
be honest about the reasons because people
Mhm.
appreciate that a lot more than being a salesy weirdo and like pretending you just want to be my friend when
Right.
really you have
You
an
wanna sell
ulterior
me
motive.
something. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's my pet peeve.
Mhm. And it happens
Um,
way more than it should.
oh, it does. Can you share an example of someone who transformed their networking approach and saw some amazing results?
Yeah, I mean, I am definitely one of them. When I started networking 5 years ago,
Yeah,
I had moved, from Northern Colorado to Southern Colorado. I was going into entrepreneurship full time. I didn't get another like full-time job. I was just
right.
gonna make my business work, and
Yeah.
I knew I needed to network, but I didn't really know why. It's just one of
Yeah.
those things. There's so many things in business that we're like, we just do it because
I'm
that's what
supposed
everybody
to
else
'cause
is
they
doing.
told me to.
Right. Like, I'm gonna do reels or I'm on LinkedIn or whatever, and
Yeah,
it's like, "Why am I even doing this?"
right.
So I was networking, and I didn't even really know what that meant or why I was doing it, but I knew I was supposed to. And, I learned a lot by trial and error,
Mm.
um, in groups that were very transactional and leads
Mm.
based and referral
Yes.
focused, right? Like, you don't pass enough referrals in 1 month, you're out, that kinda group.
Mhm.
And then I tried other groups that were very connection focused to the extent that you almost felt like you couldn't talk about your business, right? Like
Okay.
even mentioning you had a business made you
Right.
a salesy weirdo. And so really a big part of my process was trying to figure out the in between and how do
Yeah.
I navigate the transactional spaces as a human? How
Right.
do I navigate the connection relationship based spaces as a business owner?
Mm.
And, ultimately that's why I created the Powerful Women Rising community because I
Mm.
couldn't find something that was in the middle.
Mm.
And so as entrepreneurs do, we can't find what we're looking for. So we just make it.
Create
Um,
it.
but I think for me, it was really finding that balance between, and this is something that I teach and that I see working with a lot of the women in the Powerful Women Rising community. It's finding that balance between being a human, being authentic, doing it in a way that feels good and is fun, but also doing it intentionally, right? Like we
Mm.
don't want to pretend like we're just here to make friends and not make money and
Right.
grow our business,
Right.
but figuring out how to do both at the same time is really where the game changer is, I think.
Right. Yeah. I agree. I think there's also, as a business owner, more pressure on you that you have to make each opportunity count. So you feel the
Mhm.
pressure that you have to do some sort of sales pitch or you're going to lose something.
Right, right. Or like that one person at that networking event was the person who was gonna make all the difference in everything. But we do
Yeah.
that to ourselves with everything, right? Like,
Yes,
this
that's
is why
true.
we get on ourselves like, "Oh, I didn't post anything on social media today." Like, today
Yep.
was the one day that
Yep.
that person was gonna see what you posted and hire you for $10,000,000. Like,
Right.
it's not actually
Right.
every opportunity comes back around.
Yeah.
So don't stress about it. And if
Yeah.
you go to a networking event, you go to a networking meeting or wherever you're networking and all you can do that day is talk to the people that you already know or
Mm.
meet one new person or
Mhm.
manage to walk in the room and like take the 30 seconds to introduce yourself, that's still a win.
Yeah.
Every time you do anything like that, it's still practice, it's still
Yep.
moving you forward, and I promise you there's no big opportunity that you just wasted.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. I needed to hear that, Melissa.
Me too.
Any last words of wisdom before we close out?
Yeah, I would just remind people that networking really is just about creating connections and
Mm.
it can happen anywhere that you can create a connection with another person. So
Mm.
I talk a lot about networking groups and networking events, but
Yeah.
those aren't the only places that you can network.
Right.
And if that feels like too much for you right now,
Mm.
you can also find other places to network. You can
Mm.
go to, I always use a hiking club as an example because I live in
Mhm.
Colorado and all we want to do is hike here. Like, go to a hiking club. It doesn't even have to be something like business focused, but just
Right.
somewhere where you are meeting and connecting with other people. Maybe
Mm.
it is on the sidelines at your kid's soccer game.
Mm.
Maybe it is on your podcast. Maybe it
Mhm.
is as a guest on other people's podcasts, or, even social media is a place to network if you're intentional about how you're doing it. So
Mm.
find the ways that work for you, that feel good to you, that you actually enjoy doing. And don't give up on networking
Mm.
because there's so many different formats, there's so many different styles, there's so many different groups with different vibes and different energies. And
Right.
if you keep trying things, you will find what works for you
Mm.
and what you actually enjoy doing.
Mm. Love that. Um, Thank you, Melissa, for joining us. Oh, also, I forgot to say it when I brought it up, but if you want to check out, you mentioned a network planner, I
Mhm.
think. Yes. So if you're watching or listening, if you go to powerfulwomenrising.com, you should be able to find that network planner. And then
Yep.
if you want to connect with Melissa, it's the same. Username is Powerful Women Rising, not Uprising, because it's only Monday. Maybe she'll change it on Friday. Thank you so much for joining us, Melissa.
Yes, thanks for having me.
Yes. And if you are watching, make sure that you join us. Let's see if I got it. next Monday with a very, very special guest, Kalli Fedusenko, who is in fact my husband. He is going to be talking to us about how to get professional lighting in your videos. And hopefully, if we have enough time this week, we'll even take some example pictures to show you the difference in how lighting can change how the picture or video looks. He does grip for television, movies, and music videos. So he knows a lot about this subject matter and will be a great resource for any of you who can join us. Until then, have a great week, and I'll see you next Monday.